Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining for this edition of IT Connections. This is Martello's weekly series that keeps you connected to the IT tools and trends that you need to be on top to ensure reliable remote communication and collaboration. We're just going to give everybody a couple of seconds to settle in here while everyone's continuing to join the call, and then we'll begin. All right, as everybody's settling in, we'll get started and introduce our speakers. So I'll get started with myself. My name is Sandra Holland from Martello, and I'm going to be your host for today's talk. Our topic for discussion today is the Microsoft 365 user experience. So today I am joined by Olivier Reynaud. He is the VP of Client Delivery at Martello, and Rob Doucette, who's the VP of Product Management at Martello. How you guys both doing today?
Excellent. Very glad to be here, and hi everyone who has joined.
Likewise, doing well. Hi everyone.
Awesome. So just a little background on our speakers today. Olivier has worked in the Microsoft monitoring solution space for over the last 10 years. He's always focused on end user experience. He joined Martello through our GSX acquisition earlier in the spring, where he was the CTO and leading the product management for Gizmo. So he has now become the VP of Client Delivery at Martello for the suite of solutions that we offer. If you have joined us previously on an IT Connection session, Rob may be a familiar face to you. Rob is responsible for defining and driving company-wide product strategy and analyzing market trends, as well as outlining plans for future product positioning to meet the market needs. As the VP of Product Management, Rob is able to use his broad experience to align sales, marketing, and R&D to accelerate our market growth. So I'll just take a second to thank you both for joining us today and sharing your years of experience with us, and I'm really looking forward to today's session. So let's dive right into our topic. I'm going to get us started with a poll just to get to know our audience better. So I'm just going to pop it up here on your screen. So if you wouldn't mind answering, there you go. It should be showing up there for you. So I'll give you a minute to answer that poll while I give you an overview of the session that we're going to tackle today. From email to Word documents, presentations, and spreadsheets, Microsoft's suite of productivity software is a central tool for most businesses. With Microsoft 365 being cloud-hosted, it offers the ability to collaborate from any location. This flexibility, however, does come at a cost, where it presents a new set of challenges to monitor and manage the end-user experience. Organizations who are heavily dependent on Microsoft 365 simply can't afford to not have visibility into what users are experiencing. So we are here today to dig into the Microsoft user experience. So I'm going to shut down the poll. So I want to thank everyone for getting in their answers, and we will get into the discussion. So Rob, with most of the world working from home today, what should people be thinking about to ensure an optimal Microsoft 365 user experience for employees?
Right. So I think if we look at the situation that's driving some of this behavior change is that organizations and specifically IT teams have lost control and visibility into the technology stack underneath of Microsoft 365. You know, in the past, you may have been monitoring pieces and components on your in your branch offices and that sort of thing. That doesn't exist anymore. And the only thing that's left to be able to look at is the user experience. Traditional monitoring tools are still very component, computer, device centric in their monitoring strategy and don't necessarily cover the level of user experience monitoring that organizations are looking for. And so that's driving a shift in change with monitoring, where we're seeing an increased focus on technologies like synthetic transaction monitoring and real user monitoring to really better understand what is the user doing, how well are they able to access the service and applications that they need to be productive. And then there's an angle where, you know, the tools, the legacy tools, especially APM, application performance monitoring, and network performance monitoring tools still play a very important part in that picture because they can be used in conjunction with synthetics and real user monitoring to understand where that problem is, right? We might have some data from network devices between the user and the application or service they're trying to access that's being monitored by something like SolarWinds or PRTG, and it can provide us with some very useful context in terms of why someone may be having a problem with something like Teams, for example. And also that the visibility into those APM and NPMD tools are really critical as we see many organizations are going to continue to operate in some hybrid model for some time, right? Some pieces on-prem, some pieces in the cloud.
Yeah, definitely. All very good points. So building off of that, Olivier, how can Martello help to ensure that hybrid organizations deliver that optimal service to their employees?
Yeah, so just like Rob mentioned, I think it's critical to see it from a user standpoint, but not everything is in the cloud. In between the user and the cloud service, so the data center where that service is coming out, there might be a lot of elements. So it's really key to get the entire picture and to have visibility across each of those components. So again, from a user experience standpoint, but even companies who have migrated and are almost full online, many large organizations still have some on-premises Exchange servers, for example. Everybody has federation to have control over the authentication and federate throughout the various applications. There are often in-house applications that have been built in that are sending emails. So it's critical to have visibility over each of those components in order to have a picture of the entire services that are being delivered. Moreover, in large enterprises, a lot of users, even though they're connecting remotely or they are in various offices, they typically have their connection moving in back to some headquarters, going through proxies or at least firewalls, VPN into the headquarters. So it's critical to have visibility from those places and understand each part of the journey or the route to the cloud, as we say. And like Rob mentioned, I think there are some legacy monitoring tools that are providing some good visibility into the network. Well, it's great data and it's critical to have that for some of the troubleshooting. You need to have visibility on the end user scenarios and gathering facts to understand exactly what's going on directly to the cloud, or also in hybrid scenarios to understand the interactions between cloud on-prem users or at least with those hybrid components that exist.
Yeah, that's all very, very good points. Thanks for that. So I'm just going to take a quick break here for a moment, and we're going to launch our second poll so we can get a little more specific into our conversation. So I'll just have you take a moment to answer this poll for us here. So essentially here we're asking you if you have heard of Martello IQ, GSX Gizmo, both products, or neither products. So this will help give us an idea as to how in-depth we need Rob and Olivier to go into our next portion of the conversation. So it looks like half of our audience here, Rob and Olivier, haven't heard of either product. So it looks like you've got your work cut out for you in our next segment. All right, so I'm just going to close off that poll here. So thanks so much for all of your answers. So let's dive deeper into the Gizmo technology. Olivier, you're up. What exactly are Gizmo robots and how do they help the user experience?
Yeah, definitely. So let me explain a little bit, but basically the goal, as we've mentioned, is to capture the end user experience. And there's really only one way you can do that accurately and 24/7 is by simulating that experience and act as a user, just like we're doing every day in our Outlook clients, reading mail, sending emails, or in our Teams clients, doing instant messages and video calls. So the idea of Gizmo is to really simulate that experience. So we have what we call the Gizmo robots. They are probes that you deploy anywhere in the world. They run on Windows machines, and once deployed, you can easily control them from a central location and tell them to do 24/7 what your users will be experiencing. So then those robots act as a user and simulate the client. So they're not just doing browser simulations, they're actually simulating the Outlook client, the Teams client, leveraging the same protocols as your end users in order to capture the experience and the time it takes to perform any of the actions and provide really that granularity. So it's not just how long it takes to connect and reach the cloud, it's really how long it takes to send an instant message for the other person to read it, receive it. What is the quality of an audio call that is taking place?
Yeah, all very good points for sure. So I assume everybody who's signed up for this webinar is familiar with Microsoft and it's what it offers. So as most of you may or may not know, Microsoft already supplies customers with a tool called the Call Quality Dashboard, which monitors things like you were mentioning, like those voice calls. So why would I need a product like Gizmo in order to ensure the reliable user experience? Olivier, could you dive a little bit deeper into that for us?
Yes, definitely. That's a question that comes up often, especially early in the journey to moving some workloads to the cloud. Typically, there's not just the call quality dashboard. There's also the service health dashboard that Microsoft provides. Those provide good visibility. The service health dashboard provides good visibility inside of the data center, what Microsoft is monitoring and knows, and they will publish information letting you know that your users may be impacted based on what they have monitored on premises. The call quality dashboard is really good to support specific use cases. So, for example, when your CEO or some VIP users or calling in the IT department, the help desk about specific issues, the call quality dashboard allows you to go in there, look at that specific call, and look at the user environment, like what was his device, for example. If they're using a bad headset, that's something that could have some impacts on the voice, and that's something that you could see from there. So I think it's a great tool to support that use case, but unfortunately, it's really focusing on specific user calls, and it does a good job there, but that's it. It's not helping you to have visibility on the service that's being delivered. That service that, although coming out of the Microsoft data center, is still the responsibility of your teams, of the IT departments or specific teams. And it's only covering that audio call. So while it's one of the most critical aspect, it's not sufficient. We have seen issues in instant message, in search, in presence, and that's something that you need to be aware of, because any impact in those actions will have an impact on the user's productivity, might create support tickets, and this is going to be additional work for you that without the tool is going to be very hard to analyze, troubleshoot, and resolve.
Yeah, I can see Rob bobbing his head there. So that jumps us down to the next point. I'm just going to start picking on you now. So identifying the issue, like Olivia was going on about, is only the first part of the troubleshooting process. So Rob, could you dive in and explain how Martello is not only able to pinpoint the issue, but also provide that holistic view of the total impact to the business?
Definitely. So, like Olivier mentioned, the service health dashboard gives a good perspective of how well those services are functioning from the perspective of the Microsoft data center. But in order to be able to understand all the other things that are between a user and that service, we need some different technologies, right? And we talked a bit about them already. Primarily synthetic transaction monitoring and real user monitoring, right? Let's first detect the problem before we can get to the point of pinpointing. And it's important to point out synthetics are generally more favorable because they give you the opportunity to fix the problem before the user even notices, right? We're continuously testing what users would actually be doing, and we can proactively notify people that there's a problem before a user actually notices. And then when we are looking into the details of why there might be a problem, having a deep discovery and understanding of the path between the user and the service they're trying to access is critical. There are many things that can go wrong between the user and that service, right? There's local Wi-Fi, there's pieces of the endpoint might be overworked or might be impacting the ability to get to that service. DNS may be taking you to an undesirable location to get to your path to the cloud. So there's lots of different factors that are outside of Microsoft's data center, but have a significant impact on your experience when you're accessing these services. We also see a lot of value in understanding that path in chunks or segments, right? We can think of it as we kind of have the local network to the user, whether that's your Wi-Fi, your LAN, your SD-WAN implementation, MPLS, and then we go into your internet provider, we get into the backbone, and then eventually we get into Microsoft's data center. Having the knowledge of where the problem lies into one of those segments really helps people understand kind of who to blame, if you will, and what they can do about it. So you know, should I be calling my internet provider and complaining to them? Is it something with my user's endpoint that IT might need to drill into and try and solve? So it gives you some very useful context. And then last but not least, correlating this data into IQ provides us with immediate business impact. So we understand, you know, which locations are impacted, which users are impacted, are there users that are actually having problems at this current moment? And then being able to roll all that into service level agreements and service level agreement reporting gives organizations the ability to see how well is the service being delivered to their customers. Most organizations aren't really happy with Microsoft's SLA reporting, which largely, you know, ignores a lot of the things that I just mentioned, right? It's sort of outside of Microsoft's control, so I think we can understand why they do it, but it's very important as from an organization perspective that they have visibility and transparency on how well that's working. And if it's not working, what can they do to improve that, right? Maybe there are Wi-Fi issues in particular locations that would actually dramatically improve the user experience for your users in that location, which ultimately leads to, you know, employee productivity, better customer experience, all those things that we know organizations are striving for. So, you know, we really see IQ rounding out that picture to give you immediate impact and the ability to kind of look back at how well have you delivered that service and what can I do going forward to improve that delivery.
Yeah, very good. Now, Rob, for the 75% of the people that we have here on the call today that aren't familiar with Martello IQ, could you give us a little bit of a high-level overview as to what that product is and what it actually does, aside from obviously correlating the data like you were describing?
Yeah, definitely. So IQ fundamentally is built to provide visibility to an organization across all of the IT tools that they use. We know that even medium-sized organizations, but especially for large and very large enterprises, there are a lot of different tools used to manage the IT operations. You know, there's best-of-breed implementations typically are now being used. So we have, you know, network monitoring tools, storage monitoring tools, application monitoring tools, lots and lots of tools all through the organization. Each one comes with its own database, repository, set of web consoles, and that sort of thing. But for the most part, that data is all siloed into that vendor's offering. But there are many stakeholders outside of those groups that are very interested in how well our services, applications, locations, departments, et cetera, are functioning, which is a cross-section of the data coming from those tools. So what IQ does rather is pulls operational data from all of your popular IT management tools, you know, things like System Center, SolarWinds, PRTG, App Dynamics, visibility into the all three major cloud providers as well. All that data gets consolidated for the purposes of being able to understand how well are business services being delivered based on all of that data. This gives us the benefit of when a new alert comes in, let's say from a tool, or a particular device that's being monitored becomes unhealthy. Instead of trying to immediately, you know, become an investigator and figure out what really is the impact if this router, for example, were to die, I immediately know what the impact is because I have this business service modeling view at the very top of my stack. Where this becomes really interesting is when we look at taking data from Gizmo. So we understand now when a user is potentially going to have a problem through, again, the synthetic transaction monitoring that I mentioned. Now we can really focus that data lake of IT operations data in the context of a specific user issue or potential user issue. So for example, we know Gizmo may raise an alert saying that we have an issue in the Paris office, and IQ may have very relevant data about the IT operations data in that same office. So we see that, you know, there was a potential issue at 10 o'clock this morning that was detected by Gizmo because there was some slow experience getting to the Microsoft 365 services. IQ could then take a look and see, okay, well, do we know anything from SolarWinds or System Center from an IT operations perspective that can help us understand why that was the case, right? Was there high latency on an egress router or some packet loss happening? There's lots of different things that we can correlate to then be able to explain why that was a problem and ultimately fix it quickly. because the whole benefit of synthetics becomes lost if you're not able to act on it, and then real users start becoming impacted. So if you're able to take the detection from synthetics, use the correlation of data from IQ, and fix the problem quickly, in many cases the users don't even notice that there was ever a problem.
Yeah, a huge time saver for both IT staff and obviously employees' productivity. So that's fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Rob. So we're going to dive back into the Microsoft conversation here. So I'm going to launch a third poll at you guys here. So we're looking to find out how you are monitoring or managing your Microsoft 365 space. So Microsoft 365 is obviously something that businesses are very reliant upon. So should it go down, it could have a huge impact on everybody. So I don't know if you guys remember back in March of 2017, due to an intermittent Office 365 outage, users all around the world were having difficulties accessing their OneDrive, Skype for Business, Outlook accounts. This happened again in June of 2017, where another Office 365 downtime was registered across Europe and the USA. In September of 2017, European subscribers were faced with an Exchange outage online, or Exchange online outage, sorry. And then more recently, on February 3rd of 2020, Microsoft had an issue with Teams where users weren't able to access the application. So this results in loss of productivity and frustration to businesses that are very heavily reliant on the Microsoft application. So thank you everybody for your answers there, and I'll shut the poll down and we'll get back to our experts here in the space. So with everything that I outlined there, Olivier, how could Martello help to mitigate the severity of these issues for its customers?
Yeah, good question, and that's something in same thing that comes often as a question. In all fairness, I think Microsoft does an amazing job at the service they provide. It's extremely reliable, and that's one of the top reasons that organizations are choosing Office 365 rather than or Microsoft 365 rather than other services. But it does happen. It makes often world news. Microsoft does a better and better job at communicating around that. And I think it's something that is very important to be able to detect as early as possible. Just like any issue that are taking place, what we see with our clients is that typically the issues are under the control of the organization. But no matter if they are or if they're not, the most important thing is to detect. I think, like Rob touched upon earlier, it's all about detecting, diagnosing, and resolving, fixing, optimizing. And you can only do those steps as good as the previous step was. So it's all about being the best at detecting. I see that as a very top-down approach. I think what's critical is to understand, okay, what's coming out of the cloud providers, so in this case Microsoft. They do publish information. Sometimes it's early, sometimes it's a little late. It's hard for them to get that information over to you, but that's information that our products within the Martello suite are able to capture. So we get what Microsoft says from the service health dashboard, for example. Then thanks to the monitoring that's in place 24/7, as early as there's an impact for your users in your tenant, we'll be able to detect it. So it's really critical to have this synthetic transaction monitoring in place so that you can have this proactivity. You don't need to wait for users to complain for you to be aware of an issue, right? We'll know as early as it happens and that the service is impacted. So that's really the advantage of the synthetic transaction model. Once you have detected the issue, you understand its scope, the impact, who is impacted within the organization, you're able to take action. If it's something like you just mentioned that is out of the control, you can still do a lot to communicate these issues and to prevent the wave of support tickets, frustration that might take place, and you can offer possible alternatives to the end users, and not waiting for them to kind of cause frustration, impact that productivity, and end up in some shadow IT that you have no control over. So it's really important to be great at this detection and communication. And then, like Rob mentioned earlier, it's all about diagnosing that information. And this can be only as good as the data that you're already retrieving. you have some great tools already in-house. So correlating that with synthetic transactions through Gizmo, for example, and your other products will allow you to understand where is that issue taking place and what you can do to mitigate it. So I think it's really a little bit of a shift from before. Because you don't necessarily have control over everything. You can't go on your servers to look at what's going on there. It's really the service at the core of everything. And again, starting from the top, what is the service coming out and how it's being delivered to the end users. That's really the key part here.
Yeah, definitely. And just for your information, Olivier, it looks like half of our audience today is only using Microsoft's current tools. So it looks like there's a big opportunity there for better detection, which will then result in a better diagnosis, which will then obviously result in better resolution. So there's a lot of potential here for everyone to get a better user experience by employing the right tools. So Rob, it seems like digital experience monitoring is something that people are talking a lot about. So what is digital experience monitoring and how do products like ITIQ and Gizmo fit into that DEM solution?
Yeah, great question, right? It's a fairly new market, so there's some, I wouldn't say confusion, but the lines around this market may be a bit fuzzy still as it solidifies in terms of its exact definition in the market. But I think fundamentally what digital experience monitoring focuses on is user-centric monitoring, right? Understanding how is the user interacting with these services and applications, regardless of what application and infrastructure components may be doing. There's really three key pillars within the digital experience monitoring market, right? We've got real user monitoring that tells us when an actual user is actually having a problem. This is a very reactive model, right? A user is already unhappy and angry and demanding a fix, and you're kind of scrambling to try and resolve it quickly. That's why we talk a lot about synthetic transaction monitoring, where this is the next pillar. It provides us with that proactive view on if a user were trying to have a Teams call, for example, it would not be great. So we have an opportunity to proactively be notified that there's a potential issue and try and solve that. And then the last pillar is around endpoint visibility, right? Really understanding from the exact perspective of the user and the user's device, Wi-Fi strength, for example, their internet provider connection, whatever else is happening on that device, right? There may be contention for resources on that device. So those are the three key pillars. And, like I mentioned earlier, Gizmo and ITIQ both complement each other quite well, where Gizmo provides that strength on detecting that there is a problem. And then ITIQ gives us the ability to align how well those services are being delivered to the business outcomes that these organizations care about, right? Whether that's employee productivity, delivering a great experience to your customers, reducing costs of troubleshooting, that sort of thing. And I really like what Olivier mentioned about that detect, diagnose, resolve, and optimize, right? Everybody wants to be able to fix the problem quickly and cheaply. But in order to get to resolve, you can't resolve the problem if you don't have a very detailed understanding of what the problem is and where it lies. So that leads into backwards, if you will, into the diagnose. And you have no hope of diagnosing a problem if you don't even know that it exists. So we start with a very, very strong detection capability within Gizmo, leads into diagnostics, right? Correlating other data sources, the deep understanding of the user's path to the service, and ultimately leading to the ability for IT teams to quickly fix this problem. And when the detection is done through a synthetic transaction monitor, often this whole chain can happen without any user impact or a user knowing that there was ever an issue.
Yeah, and that's very important for business continuity, right? Awesome. Well, it looks like we're coming up on our half hour here, so I do want to be mindful of time, so I think we'll wrap it up there. Rob, Olivier, thank you both very much for joining me for IT Connections this week. For everyone that's attending, I will send out a follow-up email with some resources that we put together about the topic session, as well as a recording. So should you want to share that with anyone on your team or somebody you thought would find it very interesting. So thank you to everyone who took the time to listen. We hope you can join us next time on IT Connections, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.